And so, hello, everyone. Yet another session of Badass Bytes. My name is Parisa Bania. I am the business whisperer of Six Sense Strategy. To say I am stoked about this conversation with Shannon today might be an understatement. It is a big ass understatement. I'm really thrilled to have this conversation with Shannon today because I think she really embodies what to me, who to me is. Let me just do a quick overview of how I define badasses. They are people that go 80 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone. They are change agents. They are pattern interrupters. They are the people that have tremendous capacity to have outsized impact on all of us, whether it's because it's a mission, it is something that is personally important to them, or it's a product or a service or whatever. These are the people that, like I said, have outsized impact on all of us. I met Shannon, oh my goodness, I want to say over 11 years ago. I want to say over 11 years ago. And the thing that always struck me about Shannon was the creativity, the ability to chart her own course, and at the same time, the passion for a commitment to creating community. Shannon is an activist, an artist, a community builder. But instead of me describing Shannon, Shannon, speak yourself into the world. Let all these fabulous people know who you are and why it is that we should know more about you.
Oh, no pressure. Well, first, let me say I'm super happy to be here. It's so nice to see your face. It's
Yay, all
good.
the things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you did a good job. I'm an artist, an activist, a craftivist. I about a year and a half ago sort of sold everything I owned, quit my jobs, gave up my apartment, moved into an RV and started traveling the country. Which was like admittedly a much better idea before there was a global pandemic, but we roll with it.
Details.
There was
No
no
pun
going back once that hit. So, but yeah, it's been kind of amazing to go full force into it because prior to the travels, I was director of development for a nonprofit, teaching at two colleges, and doing all of this art and community building on the side. And got to a point where I felt like this is the impact that I need to have, and this is where I can have it. And if I just dedicate all of my time to it, the impact would be exponential. And so that is what brought me out into the world.
So before I go into a little bit more about all things badassery, I'd like to share with everyone some of your art so that we get a better understanding of the magic that you put into the world. This is one of many, and what is so amazing about what you do is cross stitching is something that everyone has access to. And when you typically see a cross stitch, it's something pleasant, it's pleasing to the eye, it can soothe the soul. And what I've noticed about you and your work is that sure, you've done lots of pieces of work that are pleasant, soothing to the eye and peaceful to the soul. And then what you've done is that you've disrupted cross stitch and you've turned it into a means for political discourse. And like I said, this is only one of many. Your work, some of your more controversial works have gone viral worldwide. And
Yeah.
so before we, like I said, dive too much more into badassery generally and what we're going to be talking about today, which is community building and connection, Can you share a little bit more with us about the other pieces of work that have just exploded on the internet?
Yeah, I think there's probably been, like, 5 or 6 pieces that have gone, like, super viral, I would say. My Boys Will Be Boys piece is obviously sort of the I think the biggest one, although I don't know, the virus one really took over recently,
Yeah,
and, so it's like these pieces that I make, I don't necessarily ever expect them to go viral, but when they do, you really start to see, how many people are feeling the way that I might be, or how connected they get to that piece. So, like,
yeah,
Boys Will Be Boys, for example, I am, like, wildly protective of that piece because literally millions of people used it as the illustration to their Me Too stories. So as they were sharing Me Too stories online, they were using my image, um, to sort of go along with that, and so then, of course, they tagged me in it so that they could, like, credit me for my work, which was amazing, but then I felt this great responsibility to, like, read and respond to all of these because, um, they were being so brave and it was so important, and so I have literally read and responded to millions of Me Too stories on the internet. It took over my life for a long time, but, what's funny about that piece is that it keeps going viral, right? Like,
yep.
it goes viral over and over again, and every time my phone blows up and it's like, "Oh, Boys Will Be Boys is going again," I'm like, "Ooh, who did what?" So it was like first Trump, then, Weinstein, then Kavanaugh, then Cosby, then right? So
Yeah,
anytime a sort of like a major name gets, found out, the piece goes viral again, and, so it, like, starts the whole storm all over again. But yeah, so there's been quite a few pieces, usually around controversial topics, although Rita's Quilt, which was sort of just a community quilting project
yeah.
that was the only piece or the only, thing that I've done that went viral where I got not one death threat, like, not one rape threat,
Mhm,
not one, like, piece of hatred or vitriol, and I didn't trust it. Like, the whole time I was,
mhm.
like, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like,
What?
"No, no, no, something bad's gonna happen," and
Yeah,
it just never did, and I think a lot of that was about how the press portrayed it, and, for me, it was, like, this radical feminist act, but the press really liked the story of this, like, nice group of people getting together to finish this dead lady's quilt, like that's how they framed it every time. So it made it wildly accessible and digestible, which I actually appreciated because I
yeah.
found a lot of people who would never ever come to my work came to my work through that. And it was like it was too late for them to hate me because they loved me because of the project. And
Oh, you
so
cheeky monkey.
yeah, right. And like to their credit, I toned back my content for a couple months as I, like, got people comfortable and sort of,
Yeah,
like, ramped them up to a place where I thought that we were ready to, like, dive
yeah,
in. Um, and to their credit, so many of them stayed, and, like,
yeah,
they don't agree with me on everything, and we certainly have it out, but they keep showing up, and they keep staying, and we keep having these conversations, and I think that's really
yeah.
beautiful.
That's powerful, and actually, that is a brilliant segue to talking about badassery generally.
Mm,
Um, so the types of people I like to work with, like I said, badasses who typically go 80 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone. And I was thinking about, what are the traits that I've seen? If it were a focus group of one, what would that be? And so I wrote this blog post, if anyone's interested in meandering over and taking a peek. And it's a list of 14 traits. And some of the traits are there's no crying in baseball. So it really speaks to fearlessness and not being afraid of an outcome, if it's a bad outcome, but just leaning forward courageously. Uh, Intuition, um, keeping it real. And so what you're talking about here is a blend of a lot of those things, and what you and I are specifically talking about today is what I think is so magical about you. So, Shannon, you're fearless. Even before we knew COVID was a thing, long before that, you had declared to the world what your mission was going to be, which is I'm selling all the things. I am buying an RV. Me and my fur babies are going to go from state to state to state because you have this powerful mission. You didn't need anyone's permission. You certainly had support of your friends and your loved ones, but you didn't need them to embark on this adventure with you. And yet, what you've also realized is the importance of cultivating community to allow you to sustain this adventure over a longer period of time. And so share with me a little bit more of you know how to be a renegade. Like you renegade with the best of them. And yet, um, finding your people and your story about Rita's quilt was brilliant. So if you could just share with us a little bit more about why community and connection is such a good complement with your badass renegadery.
I couldn't do any of this without community. So that's the difference. I think that we have this American exceptionalism idea, and
Yeah,
capitalism really plays a delightful role in that, in this, like, you have to do it by yourself. Everything's like you're a self-made
right.
person, and all this garbage. Which I totally espoused because I was wildly indoctrinated into it, as many of us are. And I started to realize how problematic that was, and how we can't sustain this. We can't do this. And so for me, I've seen the power of, like, building communities of like-minded people around, certain things, right? Like, Seriously
Yeah,
Badass Women is such a great community because it is um all of these sort of, like, high-powered women who are doing amazing things in the world, and
yeah,
we share that, and so building that community becomes a beautiful network. But I really wanted to demonstrate and, like, experience the power and grace of, like, creating these micro communities in spaces where people are, like, you all live together, like, you're all in the same neighborhood, you're all in the same community. Obviously you're in some way like-minded because you're showing up to something I'm doing, right? So you
right,
have to have at least some sort of
right, right.
like-mindedness. And so bringing those folks together, and yes, I become the catalyst for that gathering, but the idea is that then I create a space where they can bond and become a micro community. So when I leave, that doesn't go away, right? That stays. Um, and without all of them, like, none of this would have been possible. I'm trying to live as outside of capitalism as I can. And that means that I don't work for somebody. That means that I don't, like, have an employer who gives me health insurance, that gives me money regularly in exchange for my labor. I depend on everyone to support the work that I'm doing and to engage in commerce and exchange with me. And so one of the neat things about, I guess, one of the value adds of the pandemic, if we can call it any value add, silver lining, whatevs,
Right.
was that when it hit, all the RV parks closed. Um,
Yeah,
and then when they reopened, everybody had bought a friggin' RV, so you can't get into them. So this whole, like, what am I going to do, as I'm traveling around, had to be a quick solve.
right.
I put together a Google form, and I was like, "Yo, if you have a driveway that's sort of flat and a plug and maybe some water, some Wi-Fi would be great.
Yeah,
And you want to host me for a couple days, like, let's hook up. I'll come to your community. We can do, workshops. We can do stitching. We can do whatever. If you'll let me hang out." And,
yeah,
like, 3,000 people filled out this form, and I have literally been driveway hopping for a year and a half, meeting the most amazing people,
yeah,
and, being able to build community within within these spaces, or just support community work that's happening. And it's been magical.
So speaking of magical, this picture that you've shared with me looks to be one of your really awesome workshops. And early on, way before you announced to the world that you were going on your RV adventure, I attended one of your workshops in Chicago. So tell me a little bit about not necessarily this workshop, but how it is that the energy feels, or how is it that people find out about this and say, I would like a little bit of what this experience is.
My whole goal for social media is to use it as a mechanism for getting people together in real life, right? Like I'm happy to have our relationship on social media, but like the minute that I can take it offline and in person, I want that to be a thing.
Mhm.
And so that's what this is like, these are opportunities for my digital community to like come together in person, and have a shared experience together. And a lot of times it's like a mix of people who are like, well, I already stitch, but I'm going to come because I want to be in this space and I want to share this energy in this community. And then there are folks who are like, I've never been interested in stitching before, but now I am because of this. And I want to use this as a tool, like learn how to do this and use it
Right,
as a mechanism. But the important part is how I construct the experience in the room, and
right,
making sure that folks feel supported and connected to each other and safe to sort of go there and talk about
yeah,
things with strangers that you like would never normally talk about.
right,
And there's not a lot of time to build that because we're doing like a 2-hour workshop.
yeah.
But it's something that I've done thousands of these, and at this point, like I got it down and I've figured out exactly, how to make the magic happen. But um, it's so funny to me, and special to see at the end of a 2-hour workshop, like grown adults exchanging phone numbers so they can hang out. Because like when
Mhm.
do you see that at like a two
Yeah,
hour event? But it always happens, or folks asking me to put together an email list so everybody can stay connected after the workshop. And so I'm always happy to do all of that to make sure that the community can sustain itself, after this little burst of connection and really being a novice at something.
yeah. One of the things I'd like to touch on a little bit more is the activism part of the work. So the community piece is incredibly important, even if no one in within the context of a workshop, if what they're stitching is. I remember one of the patterns you had given us was a gun. so let's talk about the political activism piece, because what you're doing is you're it's not that art as a political message or a political medium is new. It's just there's something about cross stitch as a political medium which feels particularly dangerous. And there's a level of fearlessness in there as well. So let's touch on that a little bit, because you're doing something that is uh, disruptive, and at the same time you're saying, and here I am building community with you all as I'm being disruptive.
Yeah, embroidery is just such an interesting mechanism for this because, uh, one, it has this long history of being, a woman-led, medium, right? Which also means that comes with like a devaluing of it as a medium.
Right.
Okay, so and we're used to content that is like, you know, home sweet home and Bible quotes and kittens, right? Like this is what we're used to seeing with this medium.
Flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you really study it, there's this beautiful history of subversion within these mediums, within the fiber arts in particular.
Mhm.
But it was never allowed to be overt, right? So it was always very covert.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
what I'm doing is saying thank you to my ancestors and foremothers who
Yeah.
made the space so that now I can be overt with it, and that I can use this medium in a way that stops people in their tracks because it's so not what they're used to. Although I
Right.
would argue they're becoming used to it, and I love that.
Right.
um,
Right.
and then, so in and of itself, that's a sort of a radical act. And I think what so many people connect to, and why so many people want to come to these workshops and want to dive into this, is that they grew up doing this, right? Or
Right.
they have a history of learning this from their grandmother, from their mother, from their great
Right.
grandmother. But they didn't do it anymore because, home sweet home and Bible quotes. And now they're
Right.
seeing this new application of it, and they're like, oh, this is the way that I can accommodate all of myself in order to get back into this medium, and to, use it to express myself and express my opinions and voice.
Yeah, and that's this voice and the standing in one's power. And you're right. There's a devaluing because it was traditionally a woman's art
Mhm.
form, but over time in history, there have been any number of really powerful women that stood up in their voice and had something to say. Like one just came to mind right now is Ida Mae Wells. I mean, a woman of color, a journalist, a rabble rouser, that she was in a space that traditionally didn't belong to women. And yet she said at the same time, it is time for you all to pay attention to me and whatever it is that I have to say. And there are any number of women that we can point to. And I'm wondering the level of discomfort that people have with this. And I know you've gotten lots of nasty messages and threats and whatnot. How is it that you've maintained the course, that you stay in your courage in the work that you're doing?
It doesn't feel like that to me, right? Like, I'm really comfortable with who I am and what I believe,
Yeah,
and that's because I've spent a lot of time thinking and working on it. So it's really
yeah,
comfortable for me. So when
yeah.
people are coming at me, it just it's like one of the things that demonstrates to me that I'm doing it right, right? Like
That's exactly right.
I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Um I also like to say I'm made of Kevlar. Right? Like, you really, it takes a
You're
lot
a
to get to
superhero.
me. It takes a lot to get to me.
Yeah.
Um, and so block and delete is one of my favorite tools, and I use it frivolously sometimes because I'm just like, oh, I don't have time for this today.
Right.
I'm
Not
not
today,
here for it.
Satan.
No, exactly.
Well,
Um,
and
yeah.
and you actually just earlier today, I noticed on the Facebooks, you had shared that there was an institution that invited you to speak, but because you use badass
Mhm.
and how you describe your work, that it was, well, no, we like you, but we don't like you. We want you to tone it down. Can you? I mean, without giving it away, and I want to
Yeah, yeah.
protect confidences, but you know, tell me a little bit more about that experience where you're doing the right thing when someone tells you to tone it down.
Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot. And it's like a double-edged sword. I'm super grateful that they're willing to tell me these things, right?
Yeah,
Because I think it's actually really brave to say to someone, "I
right.
love your work. I love everything you're doing, but our audience would not tolerate this."
Yeah.
And the other side of that is like, well, then get a new fucking audience, right? Like, this is like, right? Like, come on, right? We're so afraid of offending or upsetting people who give us money that we
Yeah.
will not do things. And I'm not willing to do that. And if the word badass is the deal breaker, like, get out of here. Like, it is
Right.
not 1990s. Stop it.
Right.
Um, it does impact my bottom line though, often.
Sure. Of course it does.
This idea where, like, a amazing museum that I would love to be in and be a part of is like, we want you so bad, we would love this, but like, can't do it. That
Yeah.
like hurts because you're
Of
like,
course it
ugh,
does.
you
Of
know,
course
like,
it does. Yeah, I mean, I mean, in as much as you're made of Kevlar, there is something where when it's your life's work, when it's your mission, this is something that you're really passionate about, you know objectively that it's not a rejection of you, and yet at the same time, it can feel that way, and it would be natural for it to sting a little bit, or at least maybe I'm projecting here. It was
no,
certainly
I don't feel it as
interesting.
a reflection of me or my work. I see it as a sign of weakness, and I see it as
Yeah.
a sign of, um, like, not willing to do, like, what is coming next, right? Like, I don't even think what I'm doing is that radical, and yet,
And yet it's
it's
too
like,
polarizing.
yeah, and so that's baffling to me, is the folks who will say to me, "We want this, but," um,
You know, it's so
um
interesting. One of the reasons why I love to work with really edgy people, people who can be off-putting, let's say, to others, is that it's the really edgy people who, where, or the really polarizing people is where we get some really interesting insights or ideas. So, for example, Steve Jobs was an incredibly polarizing person. And yet, I mean, we can talk about the good and the bad of technology. And yet, there is a lot of, I mean, I'm speaking to you from my MacBook.
right,
Um,
same.
there is, yeah, I mean, there's Ruth Bader Ginsburg polarizing. Ida Mae Wells, I brought up before, polarizing. Simone Biles standing up for her mental health at the Olympics was a little too polarizing for some people. But when we have these seemingly opposing views coming together, that's where insight lives. And people being afraid of polarization at a great loss or a detriment to us. So I'm with you. Once you get pushback like that, you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually poking something, and it's time for us to continue to poke it because there's some really beautiful insight on the other side of it. So what are you doing next? I'm going to put your badasscrossstitch.com website up. I've just done that. What are you doing next? Where are you going? Where can people find you? All the things.
Awesome. I am headed north. I'm going to Philadelphia, and I have a pretty huge show opening at the National Liberty Museum on November 5th. So
That's great.
they're apparently being brave, according to other museums. I think that they're just doing great work. And so it will include an entire installation of mine, which is over 260 pieces.
Mhm.
And then I'm debuting a new piece, which is going to be, people are gonna have feelings about this one, and I'm down for it.
Yes.
It's a big one. I've been working on it for about 3 years, and I'm really excited for folks to interact with it.
Yeah.
Um, and then Badass Herstory, which is a collection. It's a community project, so there'll be over the work of over 130 artists from around the world will be on display as well as part of that.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
it's going to be an amazing weekend. I'm so excited. And then I'm heading to Boston. I'm going to visit the fam, do some workshops,
Nice.
and then I head west. But that has not been planned out yet because I can only take it 1 month at a time here.
So, Shannon, if you don't mind, I will put it into the comments section later. Can you send me the link of your
Mhm.
Philadelphia show?
Of
And then
course.
if people are curious about it, I can just, like I said, put it all the comments so that people can find you. And this is so amazing. I really was straight up honest when I said I was so stoked to have this conversation with you. I've been looking forward to a long time. I love what you're doing. I'm so inspired by you standing in your voice and your power, and you are speaking your activism into the world, and you are sharing your art and your talents into the world. We need more badasses like you, candidly.
I appreciate that. I agree. That's what I'm out here doing. I'm just like bringing them together, propping them up a little bit, and then they're like, "Oh, I am a badass." And I'm like, "I told you." You just
Right, right. You're channeling everyone's badass.
yeah, they're amazing. So it's it's delightful to watch people walk in, and then before we leave, we I have everybody share a word that describes how they feel at the
Yes.
end of that 2 hours.
Yes.
And, oh man, it always makes me so happy. Last night, there was this gal and she was like, pretty quiet and like focused, but her
Yeah.
piece was really strong. Like there was some strong language
Nice.
in there. And I was like, all right, low key, you're over there like stabbing it out. And then at the end,
Oh,
her word was, she was just like, badass. And like she literally she took up so much space when she said it,
nice.
said it with such power. And I was like, "Oh, that just made my night." Like that's why I'm out
That's
here.
awesome.
So like for that moment right there tonight.
Yeah, that reflection is so powerful. Actually, that's getting me a little emotional. I think that's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah.
I just like
I
I
cry
said,
at the end of every workshop. They leave and I'm like, "Okay, that was amazing."
well, it's overwhelming. I mean, you're getting all of this you're getting all of this connection, and that energy is so strong that
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be more than crying. I'd be on the floor like all the things.
Well,
Shannon.
I gotta drive, so you just pick yourself up and move on to the next destination.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. You are amazing. I've so enjoyed this conversation. Be
Thank
well, be safe, and I hope you have a great show in Philadelphia.
thank you. It's gonna be so fun. Everybody should
Yeah,
come.
I'm sure they will. Be well. Take care.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.